Hi there, this is Toby Milroy again. And I just wanted to take a minute to do this quick video for you. And there was a lesson that I learned in my life a long time ago that I thought I would share. And I'm sure you've been through the same thing. And this is a lesson from my dear mother. And let me tell you why I thought of this. I had an angry email from someone who's not an ATMA member, just a martial arts school operator somewhere out in the U.S., and decided to type one off and send me a nasty email about how we're doing this big event out in San Diego, California, this NATMA Extreme Success Academy, and he's on the East Coast, and we're not there to help support him because he's on the East Coast and he can't afford to get on a plane and fly across the country and pay the $300 or whatever it is tuition to be able to get to the event. And so I sent him back a nice email, and it made me think of this story in my own head, and I thought you should maybe you would get some value from this. I remember when I started my first business. I remember when I started it and why I started it, and I was 15 years old, right? And my mother was very entrepreneurial. Right, my mother owned restaurants back in the Midwest, and she was very successful, but she was also very entrepreneurial. She really had a certain mindset about opportunity and about how there are no limits on what you can really do, but there's just this immense opportunity that you can really go do whatever you want. So again, she was relatively successful. We had plenty of money. We didn't lack things. We didn't need for things. And a lot of the people that I lived around, my neighbors and things like that, when their kids turned 16, they kind of, in many cases, just, went and gave them a car, went and bought them a nice car, something like that. Nothing too fancy, but, something reliable. And my mother made it very clear to me when I started talking about that and started thinking about that it was my responsibility, that I had to figure out how I was going to go buy my own car, how I was going to do that. And when you're 15 years old, how do you figure out how to find $4,000 or $5,000 laying around, right? I mean, it's just not an easy thing, right? I don't know what the next generation, after me is like, but I know at the time, for a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old to be able to put together, several $1,000s to go buy a car was just very tough, right? So the power that she gave me in this process was asking this question, asking myself the question, how? And I relearned the same lesson when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. But let's stick with my story for today. So here I am, 15 years old, and I always got good grades, I always behaved, I was never in trouble. I was kind of one of those kids, right? I never really did much. I was pretty, nose to the grindstone. I was pretty focused on what I wanted to do. And so I was mad, right? I was irritated. I was upset that, I wasn't just going to be given this gift, right? But my mother stuck to her guns, and God bless her for it. But it forced me to ask myself, after I calmed down, after a few months went by and I gave up and I knew that I wasn't gonna, be just given something like this. I had to go earn it. I started asking myself a question. I started asking myself, how could I make this work? How could I afford this? What could I do to be able to make this work? What could I do to be able to put together several $1,000s, $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, whatever it is, to go buy a nice, reliable car? And at the time, I think $3,000 or $4,000 you could go get a car that was decent, right? At the time, certainly a used car, a good number of years old. And so I started asking myself that question, and ultimately I came up with a solution. And luckily, the first solution I came up with actually started to work. And I actually started a business. I decided, look, there are no limits. I could do whatever I want to do as long as I, comply with laws and things like that. So let's start a business. What kind of a business would I start? And I was a billiard enthusiast, like a pool, pocket billiards. And I loved to play, and I really got pretty good at it. And I love to kind of be around, pool rooms and things like that. And in the Midwest, there's a lot of really, really nice ones. It's a very popular sport in cold states, right, where it gets cold for 4 or 5 months of the year. You don't really have much you can do outside. So that was what I did. I decided to start a business in that niche. I started a little trade publication. I started like a newspaper, and it was called the Billiard Review. And I went around and I sold advertising to local business owners, restaurants and pool rooms and people who sold equipment in the industry and those types of things. So I started this little trade publication, and the first month I really had a head of steam, and I went and I got enough advertising revenue to offset 100% of the costs of the publication. And it didn't pay me for my time, but it paid for the paper and the printing and all of that stuff. And I said, well, that was interesting. What if I work a little bit harder? Now I already have a base to build on, so what if I work a little harder? And I went out and found some more advertisers. And I ended up making the business a profit center, and I ultimately ended up hiring someone to do a bunch of the writing for me and to put the thing together on a desktop publishing software, which, by the way, was pretty expensive at the time. This is 1990, I don't know, maybe it was 1980 something or another, right? Maybe it was 80, 88 or 87 or something like that. So this wasn't an easy thing to get done. And so that was what I did. And ultimately, after just a few months, I had put together enough money to go buy my first car. And as irritated as I was, my mother was right. And I'll bet yours was too. If I challenged myself to ask myself, how can I afford this? How can I do this? Your brain will come up with an answer. So my response to the gentleman who sent me the strongly worded email, my response would be, look, if you really need as much help as you say you do, you can't afford not to be at this event. You can't afford not to get a plane ticket and to get registered and to get out to San Diego, because literally it could change your life. It certainly will change your business. And I think you should ask yourself two questions. Number one, how could I afford it? How could I make it work? How could I make arrangements to get out there? What could I do? If I knew I was going to go, how could I do that? And second, I think you should ask yourself a question. What happens if you don't? What would happen? What would change in your business if you don't get on a plane and come out to San Diego? What if you stay irritated at me and decide that I'm only interested in helping schools who are already doing $50,000 a month, or I'm only interested in helping schools who already have 200 students? See, none of that's true. What's really true is I'm interested in helping school owners who want help, who will actually do what we show them works, right? So if you're willing to get there, I'm willing to get you and your business where you want it to be. So I hope that lesson from my dear mother helps you, and perhaps it's a lesson that you'll teach your kids. I certainly know it's a lesson that I'll teach my daughter. And she's only 8 months now, almost 8 months now. So it's definitely on my list already of lessons that I'll be teaching her when she gets older. So I hope that was useful for you, and I really look forward to seeing everybody in San Diego October 1st through the 3rd. Thanks so much for your time.